Great panel for you here today. Most of them you already know and don't need any introduction. We're still waiting. Well, we're not going to wait. We're going to go ahead, but there's one other panelist who may arrive while we're talking here, and we'll just bring him up on stage. I'm Don Dodge. I'm from Microsoft. I work for the emerging business team, and I'll be moderating the panel today. With us is Robert Scoble, a man who needs no introduction. He was one of my colleagues at Microsoft for several years, then went to PodTech, and now he's at Fast Company. Seated next to him is Dave McClure of 500 Hats fame. He's also a professor at Stanford, teaching a class on...
Not a professor.
Okay, a guest lecturer at Stanford, teaching a class on Facebook apps and Web2O business models. Sitting next to him, Kevin Rose, the founder of Dig. I think everyone knows what Dig is. If you have a blog, you certainly know what Dig is. And sitting next to him is Ryan McIntyre. Ryan was a co-founder of Excite back in the day. I was at Alta Vista when Ryan was at Excite. He left Excite and went into the venture capital business, so he's our member of the panel that's going to represent venture capital today. I have several questions that I'll start with, but unlike other panels, I'd like to reverse this so that you guys get to ask questions first, not at the end when we don't have any time left. So there's a microphone right here. If you have questions, jump right up. I'll recognize you throughout the presentation. But I'll just start with some general questions. So, Robert, let's start with you. You've been a prolific blogger for years and years, been very successful at it, and then you've taken a turn to video.
Yep.
And you did the video thing at PodTech, and now you're doing it at Fast Company.
Yep.
How's it going?
Going really well. We just started Fast Company TV on Monday. We had thousands of people watching. We're getting access. The content business is about getting something that's different than what Kevin Rose is doing, or Michael Arrington's doing, or you are doing, or whatnot. And so for me, getting access to the world's top businesses is real important. And like MySpace gave me 4 hours of their executives' time. Microsoft Research gave me a tour around their new building and showed me the Worldwide Telescope, which is something I don't think you've seen here yet, but it's one of the most stunning products I've ever seen Microsoft develop. And so that's the key to getting audiences, get something that audiences want to watch and talk about and pass around to their friends and go on email. I can even tell when somebody at work emails it around their mailing list because 2,000 people all of a sudden from Procter & Gamble or Ford show up, you know. Same thing, you've seen that at Microsoft. Microsoft has email mailing lists with thousands of people on it, and when you see something cool, you email it out to the mailing list, and all of a sudden 2,000 people show up and watch that video or read the blog or whatever.
So having content that people want to see, that's the key.
Yeah.
So the porn industry has had amazing success there. None of you here, of course, but somehow they get millions and millions of people who want to see their content.
Yeah.
So other than porn...
I have naked pictures of myself out on the internet, and my hits do go up. The TechCrunch, in fact, every time they talk about me, put one of the pictures that they shot in their backyard during one of their parties when we were pitching our book called Naked Conversations, in fact, which is not about the porn industry at all. But
so even in your business.
Actually, on topic on this panel, on our blog, on our book blog for Naked Conversations, we tried running Google Ads one time, and we had to remove those ads because it pulls content based on the keywords on the page. And since we used the word naked, we were getting all this adult content, and it wasn't quite the business audience that we wanted to reach.
Right. On that note, I think we should move on.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave. You've sort of specialized in Facebook apps and become sort of an authority on successful Facebook apps, how to monetize them. What have you seen that works really well?
Well, I guess I wouldn't say I'm necessarily an authority on Facebook apps, but I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's going on with them. Actually, most of the the angel investment I've made have not been in social networks. They've been in much more traditional Web 2.0 businesses, like Mint, or another one called Canopy Financial. It's doing health savings accounts for people. So they're actually a lot less exciting than the social networking stuff that gets a lot of attention. But I would say that Facebook and probably soon MySpace and others are probably some of the most amazing customer acquisition vehicles that you've ever seen. You can also lose them about as fast as you can. But we had a class of about 75 students last fall that were building usually 1 or 2 apps per team of 3. So there are 25 teams. They built about 50 apps. 5 of the apps in our class had more than 1 million users in less than a month's period of time. Now, they also, for many of them, lost that same amount of users over a relatively short period of time as well, but they were able to sustain some level of active usage. I think the ad-driven market, that's an ad-driven model right now for Facebook apps.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Are you mic'd up? Okay, just right
That model might be in a bit of a bubble because I think people are paying, developers are paying each other for app installs, and it's maybe slightly investor-driven and perhaps brand advertising-driven for those people who don't know exactly what's going on there. I think the average CPMs on a lot of those are around 25 cents right now is what social media is paying out. I could see that easily dropping by a factor of 5, maybe even a factor of 10 in worst-case scenarios, but there is still some amount of advertising going on there. But in general, I think social networks don't monetize that well, and that's probably the primary challenge for Facebook and MySpace is to figure out how do they make money and how do they also help their ecosystems make money. Otherwise, they probably won't be sustainable.
I'd like to come back to that, the business model and how they monetize and that sort of thing in a minute, and just cue you up. I wrote a blog called The Remora Business Model. And it was about, a remora is a fish that attaches itself to a big fish, and they swim along with the fish and get the crumbs. And the analogy was the remora attaches itself to this big shark and picks up the crumbs. And Photobucket did that with MySpace. And Photobucket had great business with MySpace, and then MySpace cut them off. And so I wrote that post that day saying...
I believe they cut them off during negotiations of an acquisition as well.
Right, which we didn't know at the time, but yes, that's what was going on.
Yeah.
So the question there is, can the Remora business model work? Can you be a sustainable business if the very core of your business is conditioned on MySpace or Facebook or some other big channel like that?
I mean, I think it can work. I mean, obviously, Photobucket got acquired for $275 million, I think.
Yeah, it came out pretty well for them.
But I think the challenge there was Photobucket was highly dependent upon MySpace. And even more than that, they were not necessarily a destination site, so they were dependent. So you might contrast YouTube and Photobucket. YouTube was also growing off the backs of MySpace, but was a destination site. So a lot of the users that YouTube acquired, they kept directly, whereas Photobucket was still maybe depending a lot on usage from MySpace for those as well. And maybe as a contrast to those two examples, Slide and RockU are trying to play a game where they're also acquiring users and information from operating on top of MySpace and Facebook and to a lesser extent Bebo and other networks. And they've done relatively well, at least if you think the folks in New York who paid $50 million on a $500 million valuation for Slide. But both of those companies, I think, have over 100 million installed widgets out there. The challenge is how much are those widgets worth and how much are users worth in those areas?
We'll explore that more just in a bit. Our fifth panelist just joined us, Kimball Musk. He's the CEO of Medium, which is a company that I'm quite excited about and working closely with. Prior to that, Kimball was the co-founder of Zip2, right, which was acquired by Compaq. And later, were you involved in PayPal, or was that?
I was really involved very early on.
Yeah.
Angel investor and advisor.
So your brother Elon
Yeah.
was one of the key guys at PayPal, and you were an early investor. Okay, and now he's at medium.
So are you getting a Tesla?
I actually drove the first production car last week.
Yeah.
If anyone wants a Tesla, come talk to me.
His brother last week gave me a ride around, which is up on our site. And it's a freaking awesome
It's
car.
awesome.
It's a rocket ship.
It really is awesome.
Cal Canis trying to chase you down.
Yeah, Cal Canis has a decked out Corvette and you couldn't keep up.
That's great.
Awesome. All right. Well, Kimball, we'll get back to you. I have some questions for you, too. Kevin, speaking of Jason Calacanis, small world. About a year ago, Jason was at Netscape, or was it 2 years ago? I forget. But he was at Netscape, and he had the bright idea of offering to pay the top Dig submitters like $1,000 a month to leave Dig and come over to Netscape and build this sort of competitor to Dig. It doesn't appear that it worked. How did it affect you, and what did you think when that happened?
Well, there was a few people that he hired away, but essentially, I mean, our plan was always to keep it a level playing field, not have any paid editors on the site. And his was to hire people to act as submitters. I mean, essentially hiring employees to submit and promote content on the website. Two different models. We stuck with ours, and they rolled theirs into something that's now called Propeller.
Interesting. So who do you view as your competition? So Netscape tried to come in and buy their way in. There's Reddit and TechMeme to some extent. Who do you view as your competition?
Well, we've seen. I'd have to say that there's a lot of different sites out there. Obviously, Mix, Reddit, the ones that you mentioned. They really, I don't know. We've seen lots of clones, probably hundreds of clones that are copied just like Dig-like interface using the open source Dig software, or Plig, they call it Plig software. But I really haven't seen any that frighten me yet. I mean, Yahoo Buzz launched, but it's only kind of Yahoo network sites, and you can't leave comments, and you can't submit other kind of third-party content. So I have a feeling that our competition is going to come in a form that is not Dig, that is something that is a better mousetrap, is a better way to share news socially. I don't think I've seen it yet, but the one that scared me the most about a year ago was probably Newsvine, because they were trying something different. They had beautiful pictures and AP feeds, and it was just a very well laid out and designed site. They were eventually sold off to, do you guys remember
News Corp, right?
No, it wasn't News Corp. It was MSNBC, yeah.
So MSNBC. Hey, how about that?
So they're going to be rolling their some of their products and functionality into the site. But I don't know. I personally haven't seen one yet, but I'm sure they're being built.
And Reddit was acquired by Condé Nast?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
One that hasn't gotten to the level of competition yet, but it could get there, is Google Reader. I'm
Right.
getting a lot of traffic from Google Reader because there's hundreds of people out there who are reading feeds and then share them.
Right, yeah, I use
and
that
now
too.
the new friend feature in Google Reader will bring you shared feeds from your friends.
Right.
Which is
Do you
very
find adding and removing friends like extremely
it's a pain
difficult?
in the ass.
It
It's poorly implemented and it's slow, but I'm getting a lot of really interesting
I agree.
feeds that way.
Yeah, it has to be very structured content, then, and it has to be RSS feeds. It can't be like some random picture or something that you find. But yeah, that's a very cool way. Stumbled Upon is also a great way to share and rank and really drive traffic. It's kind of like a little hidden. People don't think of Stumbled Upon as a destination, but it drives a lot of traffic when they become popular. The links. So,
Kevin, how does Dig make money?
Microsoft. We signed an ad deal with Microsoft, a 3-year ad deal where you guys pretty much handle all of our ad sales for us, which is nice because we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to hire a huge ad sales team internally, and it just made sense, and it's worked out great so far.
And that's a guaranteed revenue deal?
Can't talk about that?
Let me ask you about, you're in sort of a unique situation where you have users and submitters who are submitting content. They basically do this for free. And you're making money because you have a business you have to build.
Right.
How do your users and submitters feel about doing their work for free and you making money.
Well, I hope it's not work. we try to make it, as a system in which you use as a tool to promote and share things that you're interested in, as a way to share things with your friends, as a way to share things with the masses, and hopefully, obviously you're not coming there. If it was work, you wouldn't be submitting stories. You're coming there because you care about that article and you want to promote it to a lot of people. So for us, it's really just listening to the community and continuing to build tools and evolve the site into something that they want to see it become. And it's really, they realize that we have to make money. We got 50 employees at Dig. We spend a lot of cash on R&D and trying to prevent gaming on the site. So it is a business. But at the end of the day, the most important thing for us is really just not only innovating in our own way, but also listening to where they want to take the site as well. Dig Images is a great example. We had several stories that hit the front page that had thousands of digs that were submitted by the community saying, give us a dedicated images section in the site. And we started working on it, we launched it, everyone was happy, and as long as we continue to do that and help and let them shape the future direction of the site, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah. So it's a business, but it's really about the community. The community was so strong that you didn't lose them even in the face of Netscape offering to pay them.
Yeah, without the community, we're nothing, but yeah, so you have to be very in tune and in touch with them.
But don't you think eventually you're going to have to pay them to be competitive with what other sites they might have as available offers? It seems like even though Jason wasn't successful, that there was some merit to what he was saying about, sharing revenue with the people that are contributing content. And I think YouTube is also starting to, figure out revenue sharing programs for their, content submitters and publishers.
So, really what I want it to be is I want people to look at Dig a little bit more like they do Delicious, when it's a utility to save things and to share things with your friends. Eventually, and we're working on this now, I want a lot of structured XML behind the scenes that defines the title, description of the story, category, where it needs to be, so that it's not a process of saying, okay, I have to spend 5 minutes to submit this article, but it's just you're on a site, you click the Dig button, and it's a done deal. You don't even think about it. It's just like, I dug that, I'm moving on to something else. You don't have to come to Dig. We can't do that today, but this is what we're working on with our Write API that will be coming out in the future. And it needs to be that simple little, I'm not even thinking about it, but I click this and I know it's going to syndicate it to my friends, and it's also going to help promote it to the front page of the site.
So do you care about the distribution of those folks? It seems like if they're concentrated at the top, you're going to have to share with them, but if it's more flat, long tail, then maybe you don't have to share with them.
It's definitely very long tail today. We have a few very rock star users that come in and submit great content to the site that reaches the front page, but if you take a look at the overall promoted stories to the front page of the site, the majority of them are not from like the top 100 contributors on the site. And that's even going to be even more kind of diversified in the future when we roll out things such as our Story Suggest feature, because in the future it's not necessarily about these rock stars or who you're following. Our math behind the scenes is going to look at everything that you've dug in the past and start recommending stories to you based on what you've dug and connecting you with other users that you have dug similar stories with. So you're going to get a lot of that content, and it's going to be from people you've never met before, never heard of before.
Yeah.
Now, Ryan.
The other night, he gave me some really good tips on what you could do for your site to get better traffic from Dig.
Oh, really?
Could you just repeat those for
What did
me? Because I was asking you for what did you at the party? What do you do? Or not? It wasn't you. It was your CEO. But he had some really.
I was like, what party was I at?
But he had some really great tips for how to implement
how
Dig
to game Dig.
How to game Dig, basically. How to put Dig on your blog or on your site to make sure that you get a better audience flow instead of just putting a Dig button like I put on my site.
Right.
He actually said to put a list of the stories that your users have actually gotten on Dig, and that caused more of a two-way conversation.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different tools that we're offering today other than just the standard static buttons. We have smart Dig buttons that show Dig counts. We have tools that you can put in widgets to say these are the stories that have become popular on my site, that are popular stories that you might want to check out. But once you start doing things like that, and we've done a few experiments with some fairly large sites, once you show them that, hey, Dig, this is Dig, this is a community, this is what's going on, people are rating these articles on my site, you'll drive more of your users to say, I want to check this out. I want to go and I want to dig your stories because I love your content as well.
Now, Ryan, you're a former entrepreneur, co-founder of Excite. Now you went to the dark side and you're a venture capitalist. And one of your fellow venture capitalists, Jeff Clavier, who's a good friend, very good friend of mine, he said this week, $300,000 a month in revenue, that's noise level. What you really need to do if you're going to take it to the next level is you need to raise venture capital to take it to the next level. I thought that was a bit of a provocative statement and maybe self-serving because he wants to invest money in these companies. But what's your take on that?
Well, I think, certainly you can come up with examples, and I probably think some of the sort of skunkworks Facebook apps may at some point get to that kind of level.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Sorry, without raising a ton of money. It's self-serving as a VC to say you need to raise money to get to a certain revenue level, and of course there's sort of individual counterexamples. It's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, if you're one dude and you have an app that's churning out $10,000, $20,000 a month on Facebook or something, you're pretty happy, and maybe you don't need to raise venture capital. If you raise venture capital, you're kind of committing yourself to some degree to, I want to build a company with substantial revenues, and pick your bar, right? That could be 25 million, it could be 50 million, it could be 100 million, I would still say to a certain extent that's true. I don't know what the right bar is. Maybe it's 25 million. You need to raise money. You don't need to raise as much as you used to. It's a hell of a lot cheaper. I think back in Excite, our first query server for our 1.5 million page index cost $250,000. It was an 8-way processor with 1 gig of RAM, and the RAM was $70,000 by itself, right? I mean, so the world's different. The world's different today, and I think you can get to venture scale exits on a lot less money, but to some degree, yes, it's mostly true that you need to raise venture capital to get to, call it 1, 2, 3 million a month.
Was Jeff's statement influenced by the success you guys have had with socialmedia.com, where you're getting like $50,000 to $100,000 a day in revenue, something like that?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on the revenue because I have Mark, not wanting to talk publicly about where that is. But it's again, I will say that so far they haven't even really needed the venture capital, right? I mean, they haven't burned any of the money we've put in the company.
I mean, I think one distinction is that when you say venture capital, there's a lot of different ranges of there, and so there's people like Paul Graham and Colorado Techstars that are doing, $25,000 to $100,000 kind of level of investment. There's people like Jeff and First Round Capital, and I think Foundry Group that's maybe doing $250,000 to $2 million, and then there's people that are traditional VCs, let's say people that are managing $200 million to $500 million funds, where they're really looking to invest $5 to $10 million and more. And I think if you're not Sequoia and a few other firms in that third category, I think the world has changed, and my guess is those guys a lot of those people are going to be very challenged to find profitable companies to invest in and exits that work for them. Because most people don't do the math. Like as soon as you take a Series A investment, if let's say you take $5 million and the VC takes 20 to 35% of your company, the post-money valuation is going to be anywhere from 15 to 25 million. They're looking for a 5x or better exit relatively soon, maybe a 10x or better exit if it takes 2 years or more. So at say a $20 million average Series A post-money investment, a 5x return, they're not looking for anything less than a $100 million exit, possibly a $200 to $300 million exit. And at that level, there's not as many acquirers that are going to buy your company, and if you're not revenue producing profitably, that game may be over in 2 or 3 years time frame. At the same time, I think the world has changed where it does not require very much money to start a company at all. You guys hired a programmer off Rent-A-Coder or somebody to help get some of the stuff off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, when I started it, I did the first 6 months of Dig for under 10 grand.
Right. So, I mean,
wow.
I think it's very reasonable for a lot of companies to say, even if you hired 10 people and built a product in 1 to 2 years time frame, it probably wouldn't require more than $1 million or $2 million. And at that level of funding, you don't really need traditional VC. You might need just a series of angels to get you there. And the math that I think people should be looking at is like this. Like what's a reasonable change your life amount of money that happens with an exit? And if, say, you're you're splitting your company between 2 to 3 founders. You might at exit have 10% to 20% of the company. A $25 million exit probably results in change your life type of money, like after tax. Maybe you got 3 to 5 million, and after tax, maybe you come away with 2 to 3 million. You can live the rest of your life on interest from $2 to $3 million if you live reasonably frugally.
If you live in Iowa.
Maybe not in, okay, in Silicon Valley, maybe that number's 5. But still what I'm saying is, as an entrepreneur, probably the number you should be optimizing for as an exit is around 25 mil, maybe give or take 10 to $5 million. And
Kevin, would you sell out for 25 million?
Not right now.
But the thing
Just
that's
thought I'd
different
ask.
about that is that VCs are not looking for anything lower than 100 mil, but there's a lot of acquiring companies that would buy at 25 to 50 mil.
And I think, Dave, you're talking about VCs, larger funds to some degree, right? I mean, we've certainly had plenty of exits that have been good for us, good for, maybe not the
Well,
home
you've had a
runs.
lot of exits, but the question is, are those target? Because I think most VCs that are managing north of a $100 million fund probably would
Agreed.
say their target is north of a $100 million
Yes.
exit.
I would agree entirely, and there's sort of, it's a philosophical thing too, right? Which is, some VC models are predicated on, shoot the things early that don't get traction, don't put another dollar in it, because you're only going for the 10 baggers
What
to
does
make
it
the
mean
fund.
to shoot a company early, by the way? Does that mean shoot the entrepreneurs? Or?
That means, if something's not going well, not another penny goes in. That's certainly not our philosophy. And maybe to our, in some cases, we've put way more money in companies than we should have because you believe and you want to make them go. And part of that's, we're all at Foundry former entrepreneurs ourselves. So, I think that makes a difference in perspective in what you're doing. Our fund is $225 million, which is big for early stage, but we'll do everything from like a $500,000 investment to, a recent investment we did was $8 million first money in. But you have to have the right set of expectations. I mean, you are, as an entrepreneur, if you're taking venture money, you got to know what you're doing.
Okay,
You're
we have
signing up for a different outcome.
We have a question from the audience, so let's hear the question there.
This question's more for, I think, Robert and Kevin regarding more Revision 3. The other day we had the producer from King of Kong here after a screening of the movie, and one of his, I asked him, what do you think is it really going to take to get video in the mainstream to really, I guess, corrupt the system of broadcast networks, cable, et cetera. And his opinion was that the technology actually exists today, but the packaging of it in terms of how you watch it, where you watch it, and the marketing surrounding that wasn't where it needed to be for that true transition to happen. And I was wondering what your thoughts were.
I'll start. I talked to Harry Fuller a month ago, and he ran CBS KPIX TV in San Francisco, which is he ran the
ZDNet
newsroom,
too.
and he's been in the TV business for a long time. He said, forget the internet, just watch what's going to happen in TV when the money from the political candidates disappears at the end of the year. He says there's going to be a bloodbath in TV news because the TV news business right now is overbuilt, and the audiences are disappearing and the money is disappearing, and right now it's being propped up by the billions of dollars that are going to be spent in the next few months on the presidential campaigns. But in terms of media, this is a trillion channel world now. When I grew up, I had 3 channels to watch, right? Now you go to Google and you type, Martin Luther King, and there's some video there, right? And that's a channel. And when you're sitting in Google's headquarters and you're watching the search terms on their screens in their lobbies, you start realizing every single search term that's being made around the world is a little channel that needs some video. And very few of those channels right now have any video. So it's, first of all, we need content to hit all those channels, right? And get deeper into the long tail. But then we're how do you build a massive audience? That's tough. Because, that little Martin Luther King video will get 50 hits a day, from school kids who are doing searches or maybe more. But it's not the 30 million people who are watching the Super Bowl, right? It's the long tail has all these little buckets, and that's why I'm basing my business based on that nicheness, not on trying to be the Super Bowl or trying to be Lost or something like that. And I think the VCs who have invested in this space have made some mistakes because they expect that entrepreneurs are going to be able to build a large audience, and that's going to be really tough. Your audience on Dignation is like one of the top video blogs in the world, right? And you have what, a few million people watching it a month?
There's about 250,000 a week watch it. Yeah. So,
yeah.
but for us, it's not. We don't ever think about just killing television. Like that's never like when we go into work at Rev3. That's not our goal. It's really about how we can. So when I was at Tech TV, it was all about Nielsen ratings, and we were rated a 0.15, which is 150,000 viewers at any given time were watching the show. We were on third-tier digital cable, extended platinum. It was really hard to find the channel. So for us, it's how can we move our content around and get more people watching. So we do anything and everything we can to get our content in as many places as possible. So that means on-demand programming. We ship it out to traditional television. Say, hey, put it on your on-demand channels. That means getting it on Virgin America airplanes, iTunes, so it can get on the television if that's where people want to watch it. Or I should say, what's our little device? Apple TV. So it's really about every show that we take and every show that we produce, we compress and redistribute in probably about 10 different formats now. Yeah. And they all add up, and that's what the advertisers care about, is how many downloads, how many views are you getting on your content. And that's how we make money.
Yeah. Let's turn the conversation, that's a good segue to the next topic I'd like to cover. I've got a slide up here on the screen. You guys can see it down here. Yeah. About how many page views you need to generate in order to reach a certain revenue target. So 25 million in revenue, that's a medium-sized software company, pretty small software company. And most VCs that are going to invest in a company are going to look for 25 million. So when you look at this chart, to generate 25 million in revenue, how many page views do you need? Of course, it depends on your CPM rate or what you're going to generate. But let's just pick the middle one, $2.50. That's pretty minor. 833 million page views. Yeah. How many sites do you think get to that level?
Not many.
Not many.
Maybe Microsoft.com.
I want to come back to that Remora example you had where you look at the social networks, they have this incredible amount of traffic, but revenue isn't that interesting, because I'll be surprised if they actually have even 50 cents RPM. And way I like to look at the social networks is kind of like the new version of Yahoo Mail. And Yahoo Mail was a loss leader for Yahoo Search.
Right.
Except MySpace and Facebook have the loss leader, but they don't have the thing they're going to monetize by using the loss leader. And I think Facebook was brilliant by opening up the platform, because if I was Facebook, what I would be very carefully looking for is what is my app that I'm going to be able to monetize using my loss leader, which is the platform itself. And I think in this particular example, an RPM of $2.50 is huge in the Web 2.0 space. It's huge. Yeah. If you have that, then that's probably the harder thing to achieve than 800 million page views, frankly. Yeah.
I have CPMs about 600 times higher than any of those.
Well, so, you're a special case.
No, I think you need to look at the world like a magazine publisher. Remember, I used to publish Visual Basic Programmer's Journal, right, or help publish it. And we had 100,000 subscribers, and we had more than $10 million in revenue a year, right? Right. So that's the way to look at this world is don't go into the CPM world and try to think about the CPM world. Try to think about the magazine world. How are you going to build a property that gets an audience that a lot of advertisers want to focus on? And
so Ryan, you talk to entrepreneurs all the time. Do they make that distinction between target an audience where we can really monetize it well, even though it's smaller, or are they looking for the big audience and trying to get 50 cents?
Well, I mean, a good entrepreneur will understand the distinction, and you can, depending on the site, run, happily sites we're involved with on the, publishing side are, doing a lot better than the sort of 50 cent CPM. As you get more targeted, you can get the $10, $15, $20, $40, $80 CPM in some cases. But I think what Kimball's alluding to is that's all well and good, provided you actually know that that's what your audience is and you can actually target against that audience. And the social media universe is kind of in its infancy right now. So it's a little difficult to slice and dice your audience if you're a really popular Facebook app and deliver that kind of highly targeted experience, right? And kind of what's keeping the boat afloat, aside from the sort of barbers giving each other haircut phenomenon of all the different
I believe I called that the developer's circle jerk.
Ah, yes, the developer circle. But, you know, the guys paying one another for installs, which is probably, you know, sort of a current artificial boom in Facebook app advertising is right now, I think what's beyond that, it's just, you know, typical branded display, impression-based advertising that's going on, which is, you know, Coke knows they need to spend, you know, $25 million on an online media buy, and it's not intense spending where it's cost per click type advertising. It's just, you know, I need to throw impressions up there and I can buy that. But that, you know, that is not nearly as valuable, and the margins on that, you know, as somebody who's running advertising is never going to climb up to those highly targeted, you know, $10 million CPM range. And by the way, I'm kind of interested in, you know, with the economic downturn and drops in consumer spending that we're expecting, what's going to happen to that side of the market, which is, you know, there is so much kind of display advertising, banner-based advertising that's come back into the market, you know, which dried up during the first downturn when the bubble burst. By the way, which is, you know, one of the things that killed Excite, right? Which was, you know, we were this close to being Google, right? But you hadn't figured, you know, and Don would say the same thing at Alta Vista, right? Which was hadn't quite cracked the code of the cost per action advertising, which in a downturn, as a marketer, you're going to spend against that because it's quantitative marketing dollars as opposed to the throw it on the wall and, you know, the old joke about half the money I'm spending on advertising is wasted, but I can't tell you which half. Yeah. Right, and so it'll be very interesting to see what happens to the display ad side of the business, which certainly relative to 10 years ago has moved in terms of billions of dollars into the ad market, but I don't know what's going to happen to it.
I think it will actually be interesting what happens to the CPC business, because I think what happened is the last depression sort of killed CPA, and CPC was born. And I think if there's the next depression, I think what you'll see is it'll have a significant impact on CPC, and CPA will actually start to emerge. Because what you said is that in a down market, advertisers want to go away from risk, and so when I have a display advertising that's basically just creating impressions, there's a risk of whether they click on something and then whether they buy. So CPC emerged, but there's still a risk on CPC that they click and they don't buy.
Right. CPC doesn't close the loop, right? It's like, well, I can spend X dollars to get somebody to my site, but then I still have to worry about converting them, whereas CPA is the panacea.
Okay, let me take a break here. Just for the audience, CPC is cost per click, and CPA is cost per action. Yeah, that's what they were talking
about. So when you're on Google, the ads on the right you're paying every time you click on one of those ads.
Right, cost per click. We have a question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Nicole Simon. I'm from Germany, and I would like you to monetize on me. We don't have a downturn in economy. We have a great exchange rate. I would love to buy. I would love to spend money. Why is the...
Pay me in euros, please.
You had just some trips to Europe. You probably just cried over whatever you or Marion were spending. But the fact actually is that the whole, I would call it Web 2.0 business, is still very focused around everything US. So it's the downturn, it's the advertisement. While there is a world out there you could really make money on, and even just the English-speaking world. Because I speak English, I can spend money. I spend kind of more money in the US, for example, than I do actually in Germany. So what are your steps towards really engaging the international market? Because every time I have a sweepstakes, every time there's like a competition, it always says like only open to the US residents. You attract me, you bait me with, come to me, we have the great stuff, you can, great. And then you just slap the door in my face and say, not for you, go on. So.
As somebody who worked at Microsoft, there's all these legal rules around contests, and it's just such a pain in the ass to get it to work on every country that you just sort of take the lazy route and say, hell with it, default US only. I think it's no accident that when Mark Zuckerberg took me on a 3-hour walk at Davos, that he talked at length about his efforts to get into other countries and expand Facebook. And when I visited MySpace, they made a major point about bragging that they're in 26 countries. They know that the money, that their future growth is going to come from around the world, not the U.S. market. And
I mean, there is a point of picking your battles, though. I mean, if you're an American company and you need to focus, and focus is one of the biggest challenges of any startup, and Medium has a major back-end scaling challenge. And you know, we started to get a lot of traffic from China, and we love the Chinese, but it was hurting us and it wasn't helping us. So we actually, we haven't quite shut them off yet, but we're actually in the middle of trying to decide whether we should shut them off. Because it's a distraction to support a scale level that the Chinese can bring a level of scale that's just very scary as a startup. And you just have to make a choice sometimes. Germany is very different. I mean, Germany is a fantastic market, and it's a great growing market. So, but it's also smaller than China. So it's just a matter of picking your battles.
So is it that the Chinese market will be interesting to you when you have enough money and resource to get there? It's just it's too early.
Oh, I think it's a very interesting market even now. But we would probably raise another round and invest in a separate infrastructure for that country because it's a different language. It's a different community. You could actually create a separate shard for them.
You have to. I've been to China, and it's a different culture. It's a different way of doing business. You have to have people on the ground who understand that local market, and probably that's the time you would probably partner with Microsoft or Google, who are building teams and ad sales teams over there and can help you out.
Speaking of raising another round,
I just wanted to one real quick thing about analyzing language markets. So when I used to work at PayPal, I was always trying to convince people to localize to Spanish and Japanese because I thought they were big opportunities, and I couldn't get any of his attention until I put the spreadsheet together that analyzed by average GDP per country, online percentage per country, language aggregation, and then country specifically. And when you did the calculations for Spanish speaking in the U.S., there's actually 2 versions of Spanish. It actually started to look like real money. And I think people were kind of downplaying the benefit of localizing to at least Mexican versions of Spanish and PayPal until they actually did that calculation. But even for people going to the EU, because there's distribution, it's large overall, and actually that's getting better now that you have sort of one currency, but you still have to localize to a bunch of languages to get to that market.
Ryan, are you an investor in Medium?
We are not. We were a little too late to the game. We didn't get our fund closed until last November, and so Medium was already up and running. My partner Brad Feld, though, is actually a personal investor in Medium, and we're in the same building, literally right across the hall from each other. So, we're big fans of Medium users, and as individuals, investor.
So some individuals, but not your fund. Kimball, tell me more about Medium. What is Medium? Maybe some of the people here don't know what it is, but it's a totally new thing. I was excited when I saw it. Just tell us a little bit about it.
Well, we just launched with IE8, so if any of you guys are interested in finding out what we're doing there, I'll get to that in a minute. But basically what Medium is doing is we're asking people to download an add-on to their browser to create a social browsing experience. A social browsing experience basically is, if you're in this room, you're surrounded by people, you see a friend across the hall, you might pass by someone who has a similar, doing something similar of interest to you, you might want to engage in a conversation. To us, that is the internet. The internet is playing on this idea that in the real world, the people and people around you constantly influence your behavior and activity. By downloading Medium, you can now browse and see the people around you. You can be on Dig, for example, and you'll see what people are doing inside of Dig. They're all Medium users. They've all opted in, so they're fully aware of the fact that they're sharing their clickstream, that their presence is available to everyone else. You can see what everyone's doing right now. You can engage in conversations. You can surf with your friends. And so what we're doing, in effect, is from a technical perspective, which is why scale is such a huge challenge for us, is we're creating a real-time layer on top of the internet that is matching people as they move around and trying to build a world around you as you move.
Very cool.
Yeah, sort of like Second Life, but for the internet, for the whole internet. And so we have a very different problem to Web 2.0. Unfortunately, we couldn't run for 6 months on $10,000. We couldn't launch the beta without a $500,000 investment in hardware. It's an unbelievably difficult thing to do. People have been trying to do this for years. Enormous implications around search, enormous implications around e-commerce. If we get this right, it has unbelievable implications around advertising, because matching people in real time will eventually match advertisers to people in real time. So check out IE8, which is a fantastically cool new browser. The activities browser, basically you can just click on the Medium activity and see the people that are surfing near you on the internet, whether they're on the same page or on related pages.
So the business model, say a little bit more about that. You talked about matching users with other users and then matching advertisers to users. Is that the model that is going to?
Yeah, I mean, our model is very much, we see Web 2.0 as this huge loss leader for something. And we don't know what it is yet, but it's this huge loss leader for something. And we believe that we have the potential at Medium to change that. And I'll get a little technical here, but if you look at the way people surf, they multitask. We all know that, but when you actually see it, it's unbelievable how scattered people are in their brains. They'll go, let's say you're looking for an iPhone, you'll go to an iPhone blog, and then you'll go to Facebook. And you'll hang out there for 5 minutes, and then you'll go to your Gmail, and you'll hang out there for 5 minutes, and then you'll go back to your iPhone task, and then you'll go back to Facebook, and you might make it, download a photo. Then you go back to iPhone, and it's this, click stream of 100 clicks, of which 8 or 9 are the real nuggets of what you're actually doing, what's valuable to an advertiser. And what Medium is, its long-term goal from a business model perspective is to identify that task such that when you get to Facebook, we can in real time say, you should consider a Zune, put a Zune ad up there. Or you should, when you go to Gmail, get an advertisement for accessories to your iPhone.
Because you know where they're
Because we know where they are in real time, and we can process that in real time. Now that is a technical task of the highest magnitude that we had to raise a ridiculous dollar amount of money to actually just get started. It's an enormously exciting field, and we expect to grow it over the next 5 or 6 years to eventually become the ad engine for the web. But it'll take a long time to get there, and we need to make sure every step of the way we're providing really powerful user value to people. The first one is the sidebar in IE7 and IE8 now. People have, we're growing. I think we've tripled our numbers in the past 3 months. We're a very young company, growing at a great pace, and faster than we can scale. So that's why we're in the middle of trying to decide whether we turn off China.
So traditionally, advertising has been targeted based on keywords or based on content or where you are. And it's really, really hard to do. Google has done it well. The search engines do it well. Once you get away from search engines, it's tough to target advertising to the users. So you've sort of created this new way to be able to target advertising based on their clickstream, where they've been and what you know about them.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what Google does so well and what Overture did so well, is they solved about 1% of the problem in identifying tasks. And 1% of the problem is, of course, worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. And that problem was you do a search for iPhone on Google. They know you're looking for an iPhone. They're going to give you match advertisers up for you. So they kind of have an idea of the task. They don't know if you're really buying an iPhone. They don't know if you're looking for information about it. They don't know if you have broken your iPhone and you need to fix it. They don't know that sort of stuff. But they know the 1% of the problem. What we want to do is try and get maybe another point or two where you get to a place where, well, we think this person's looking for an iPhone, and actually we're probably thinking this person's looking for an accessory. They already have an iPhone. And that, if we can deliver that kind of value to the social networks that have this unbelievable user base that they're working to monetize, if we can figure out a way to identify the task of the person while they're looking at Facebook, because there's no task in Facebook, checking your email, what is the task that is wrapping their experience in Facebook? And if we can bring that to Facebook in real time, that is, we believe, worth billions of dollars.
Kevin, I have 2 questions for you. I just heard about Medium being able to watch where I'm going and going to Dig and what I'm clicking on Dig. How do you react to that? Does it bother you at all that Kimball's got a company over here that's making money based on the users that are going to Dig and what they're doing? Does that bother you at all?
No, not at all. I think that if he's providing a service that our users are going to get some enjoyment out of, then that's a great thing for us, right? People are enjoying our site even more because they're able to have that kind of conversation with other users, and I'm all for it.
It actually builds that community, too, because the users see where their friends are going, and if they're all going to Dig, then they're going to go to Dig and see what's going on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's about the community. Have you thought about other revenue models beyond advertising for Dig?
Well, what we're working on right now is really not focused on that side, but more on connecting you with similar stories and other users that you may find of interest. So the engine that we'll be launching is, like I mentioned earlier, essentially goes back and looks through all of your digging history. And it compares all of those digs in real time with everybody else's digs and all of the new incoming stories. So we're able to find those matches that overlap. Just because you were dig number 5,000 on a story, who are those other 4,999 people, and what else have they found that you might also find interesting? So we'll start exposing you to those stories and exposing you to those users that you're always agreeing with, you just don't know who they are, and then eventually potentially port that to advertising as well.
That's a good segue to the next subject. I'd like to talk about privacy. So we've talked a lot about following people around, what they're doing, knowing what they're doing. What are the privacy implications to that, targeting advertising based on clickstream data?
Privacy's dead.
You know, we started, this is so true, it's unbelievable.
Meaning there is no privacy.
We started Medium with this unbelievable fear of privacy. I mean, because this is, before we launched, the AOL search stream kind of got leaked out, and it was a big nightmare, and there were a few other things, I can't even remember what they were. And we were terrified that here we were a company, we were saying, give us everything that you could possibly imagine giving someone, and we're going to give you, in the early days, something, you know, that's still a work in progress. And we were blown away. I mean, I don't think we've gotten a single. I mean, we're very careful about privacy. We give people unbelievable controls. We do everything we believe is right. We make sure they give value. We tell them what we're doing. But I don't think we've had a single negative comment on privacy.
That's key. For me to accept that kind of system, I want to see transparency into the business and into what you're doing with it. I want to understand why you want that and what I'm going to get in return for sharing all that information. So
you wrote the book, Naked Conversations.
Yeah.
It's about transparency and openness, and privacy is sort of dead in some sense.
Yeah. My 14-year-old kid just does not care about privacy. He does not have these kinds of conversations with me. And he's all over the internet, and his friends and people know exactly what he's doing. Same with me.
You post your cell phone number on your blog, so you're pretty open. Privacy really doesn't bother you, does it?
Not too much. No.
Kevin, how about you? You're collecting clickstream data on, you know a lot about your users, you know a lot about what they like.
And we're going to offer that data back to the users, the clickstream data, so they can download it, take their attention data and move it to other places that they like.
So we're going to say you're going to offer that to other advertisers.
Just the users.
That's very valuable data.
Yeah, it's very valuable data, and they should be able to move that around. They should be able to move their digs around. All the content that's submitted to dig is under the public domain Creative Commons license, and so we just want to stay as open as possible. And yeah, if there's ever a time when we start sharing certain information with advertisers, we'll be upfront and let people know ahead of time, give them a way to opt out. I think it's all very important stuff to do. But yeah, privacy is a big issue with our community, and I don't think that everyone is totally cool with. I've seen a lot of users pushing back in various sites, and poor Jimmy Wales, God, that's horrible. Yeah, it's tough.
You make your bed, you sleep in it. You know?
I think if Don McCaskill, the CEO of SmugMug, was sitting on this panel, he would be calling us all. He would be calling us on our bullshit, because he's built a company without venture capital, without advertising, and with millions of dollars of revenue by charging his users. And he has hundreds of thousands of... What a concept, right? So what do we think about... I mean, is there room for companies like SmugMug that aren't doing the standard Web 2.0 thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think Web 2.0 is not equivalent to, sponsorship and advertising. I think Web 2.0 means your business is online. I think the primary thing that people should realize out of that is that you can do real-time metrics to assess what the customer experience is and make changes. Like, that's really what Web 2.0 is about. And unfortunately, most companies don't do that. But there's a whole variety of business models that you can use. And I certainly think, subscription and lead gen and lots of other, creative ways to advertise, creative ways than just advertising are viable. It just may be that you have to do more for that type of sponsorship. And so I think content without applications is a very challenged business model unless you're in porn. And so there's not too many paid subscription models for content that are going to work unless there's really uniqueness to that content. And maybe the Wall Street Journal gets away with that, but I think even they are considering changing it. But I think as soon as you start combining applications with content, there's a whole range of services that people can create that are very unique. And when they're unique, paying for them makes sense. And while a lot of people like to say that, you're competing against free and it's very tough to compete against free, at the same time, I think under $20 a month charge, at least in a lot of people in the Western world, is effectively free, because it's that cost of what are you going to take time to unsubscribe from And for something less than $10 to $20 a month, it probably don't give a damn, right? If there's certainly a certain amount of value that's being created there, I pay for, even though I don't think Backpack is a perfect service for me, I still pay $9.99 a month for that service. For a bunch of other things, Consumer Reports Online, I pay $3 a month. There's a whole range of things for under $20 a month that are so effectively close to free that you probably should be trying to incorporate a paid subscription model for at least a percentage of your audience. And I think the biggest challenge is what percentage of your audience and what percentage of your feature set you choose to make free versus paid, and how does that affect
This is
growth
where
rate?
venture capitalists actually drive me crazy, right? And they did this in the 90s, which really...
Sorry, Kim.
Sorry. Love you, Ryan.
You weren't in VC in the 90s, though, right?
No, I mean, this was... so I had a company in the 90s that was, by every stretch of the imagination, a very successful company. And we work with the New York Times. We work with major content companies around the world, building some very interesting, cool things. The venture capitalist scene in the 90s, obviously everyone knows, was ridiculous. The amount of money that went into the business. And every single deal we went, the next deal we had to charge less. And the next deal we had to charge less. And the reason why was because you had some random company that had a $50 million investment that was trying to take our company out, that had the worst possible technology in the world, but they were doing it for free. And eventually we had to sell the company because the price was just getting driven down to zero. And I think the issue with these great subscription products out there, SmugMug and other companies like that, all it takes is 2 or 3 VCs to fund a competitor, and SmugMug's business model is gone. Well, and that doesn't mean that those other companies are successful. The venture capitalists are looking for that. Could we find a way to monetize this in a different way than subscription?
But I think the difference is that the initial model has to be free. The subsequent model doesn't have to be free. So if you're competing with other free models, yes, for the first user experience, you have to have a free experience so that the user can understand what you have to offer, and they're not going to be like going, okay, I'm not even going to seed behind the door until I start paying. That's not going to work. But once you've got users on your site, I think it's very reasonable to suggest that some percentage of that user base can be converted to a paid model of some sort, whether it's lead gen, subscription.
Right. Or virtual goods, like Hot or Not sells flowers for $10, which is, by the way, more than a real flower costs.
As much as I respect that there are plenty of money being made with virtual goods, I think that's a little bit more the exception rather than the rule. And I think the way that I like to say to entrepreneurs to think about like how to create business and how to create business models, do something that you love, do something that you would be a customer of. Start out trying to have a free experience for that, but then figure out what's unique about what you're doing or make it more unique, and then figure out how to start charging for it in a way that doesn't seem like people are paying for it, they're paying for value. And finding that, what I think is the interesting choice is what is the impact of growth rate when you take a certain percentage of feature set and make that free or paid, like defining that line so that it feels like you're getting a full user experience for some amount and you acquire users and get a retention component, and then trying to figure out where you convert to paid.
Right, but the paid might be, best case scenario 10%, more likely 1% or less of your user base, and it's the art of slicing it so that the free version isn't some hobbled, crippled
and it
version.
also doesn't deter your growth rate or conversion rate down the road.
Yeah.
We do the same thing in my other startup, Pounce. We offer a free, fully featured version of the site, and if you're heavy on file trading, you can then pay for like a larger account, custom themes, things like that, and the conversion works for us.
What kind of conversion rates are you seeing? Because I did a survey of, there's probably 15 companies that do the freemium business model. Freemium meaning it starts free and then you pay a premium for other services. And I'll give you the benefit of my research. It was about 3% conversion rate of the free users to the paid subscription. It was about 3%. What are you seeing?
We're right around the same, about 2 to 3%. And it's very early on. We only have 180,000 registered users,
so 3%, you can make a viable business having a free service and converting 3 to 4% of the users. You can have a very viable business.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have 10,000 customers at $10 per month, you've got $1 million a year business.
That's pretty good. I had dinner with Rajiv Motwani. He's the Stanford professor. He was the professor for Sergey Brin and Larry Page. And he invested in Google and did very, very well. And I had this business model discussion with him, and he said that he would never invest in a company that was just advertising based. And I said, wait a minute, aren't you the guy that invested in Google? He said, yeah, but I would never do that again. I said, I would. Right. Okay, so Ryan, you're making investments in companies. Do you sort of have filters where you're looking for multiple revenue streams and channels and certain hurdles?
It depends on the business, and we invest sort of across the market spectrum. So we'll do enterprise type investments as well and not just ones where you're relying on sort of media consumer type things. Where I think there's very few enterprise companies you'd invest in that you would say. I'm comfortable with you having an ad-supported model or a free model. Of course, you need a subscription service, right? We were early investors in Postini, which Google acquired last year, and that was all about. That's a very obvious sort of user benefit. It got huge during the 2003 period when every IT guy in the world had to fix the spam problem or lose his job, right? And so, that's a monthly subscription service. So again, if it's a consumer-facing thing, the answer is it depends, right? It depends on the application. I mean, we'll do sort of Web 2.0 investments. We did investments like FeedBurner, pretty much strictly advertising based. And by the way, I think one of the questions you talked about was this another question of scale. FeedBurner got really interesting when they got to the sort of 500 million monthly sort of advertising units availability on their feeds, and that's when Google came knocking. And so, if it's a traditional kind of media type play, you want to believe that it can have a certain scale. Maybe there's a subscription model attached to it. Certainly on the enterprise, we're a lot more. If we're going to do an enterprise type investment, we're going to be much sort of more focused on what is the exact business model, what's your pricing model, how are you acquiring customers, et cetera. It's just different things. I mean, we also did Sling Media, $249 piece of consumer electronics hardware, right? Which I don't know if that's Web 2.0 or not. I mean, I guess it is in the sense that you're watching your TV over the internet, and that had first people were just buying widgets, buying the boxes, but we had a belief that with a sufficiently large audience, that was going to open up advertising revenue and whatnot as well over time.
So let's go through that. You've had 3 really successful exits. You had Postini. Mm-hmm. What was the business model on Postini?
Per user per month charge.
Per user per month.
Per mailbox per month kind of charge.
Okay. Sling Media, that was hardware
Yep.
and subscription kind of stuff?
No subscription, and that was very intended when we made the investment, which was TiVo had the $10 a month problem, and that was because they were selling a box at negative gross margins, and so they needed a revenue to turn the customer into something profitable over time. The elegance of Sling was that they could sell this box at $249 at retail and actually make nice margins just selling the box, and we believed that consumers had subscription fatigue. And it was actually a selling point, right? It was
fatigue.
Absolutely, and there was a big sticker on the box saying no monthly
We
fees.
have social media fatigue.
And then FeedBurner was the last one.
Right, and that they created a new unit of ad inventory.
So free to the users, and you just put this little ad on the feed, and that's why they made money.
Yeah.
Well, I'm having a great time up here asking questions, but we're almost out of time. So if you do have a question, please go up to the microphone, and I'll recognize you there. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep asking questions. Freemium. We've talked about freemium, so I won't ask that one. Oh, here we go. See, that did it. All right, we'll go to your question.
Well, social networks are all about what your friends are doing, right? I mean, that's kind of what starts the ball rolling, right? So like with Kevin and with Kimball, how do you guys start that initial ball rolling? Because, with your application, it's a wonderful idea, and I think it's really cool. But how did you get it out there so that their friends also have it? And you get the critical mass question, I guess, is what I'm asking. And like with Dig, I mean, how did you dig, basically? Because now, if people want to get their sites going, they dig, right? But you didn't necessarily have dig around to dig. So
it's a chicken and egg question.
I'll answer that on both sides. They went around the blog world and showed it to people.
Medium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They showed it to my video cameras, right? And they went to TechCrunch and went to you and went other places and just kept showing
Yeah.
in front of people.
Well, I mean, in our case, because we're a download, we did that in addition to having a fantastic partner like Microsoft that has been unbelievably. I really need to say that.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is before Don brought us in as a startup accelerator. Just as a general small company building something for IE7, we knew that we had this critical mass problem. We have a much bigger critical mass problem than almost anyone else out there. Because it's kind of it's a real-time engine.
Sure.
So we're not even close to critical mass. We're by no means. But one of the things we also did was we focused on a product, and I think Dig did a great job of this, was even if no one's on the system, it's still kind of interesting and valuable. Like it's becoming much more, in Medium's case, about where your friends are online, and it's more of a simpler value statement than where we think it's eventually going to go, which is really creating this real-world environment online.
So Kevin, how did you do it? How did you get Dig going?
Well, I think that I started off with the readers of my blog, which was a few hundred people, and then what happened was kind of this circle of love from webmasters and users, and that good articles were getting promoted to the front page of Dig. Users were taking notice and sharing the Dig concept with their friends. More stories were getting dug and submitted. Eventually, those stories would make it to the front page. Webmasters would see that traffic. Who calls them webmasters anymore? What would they call them? Back then, it was called webmasters.
CTOs.
That's right. CTOs would see the traffic. They would notice that they were getting, who are these 300 users that just came in from Dig? And what they would do is they would then blog post about it and tell their communities about Dig. Like, hey, go dig my articles. Put up little buttons, little badges, whatever it was, and then that started all over again. So
that's how I heard about it. I started seeing traffic coming to my blog, and I'm like, what is this Dig thing? And I went to look.
Well, ultimately, you need a compelling application. I mean, it is a chicken or the egg story, but if Dig hadn't have been cool and useful, you could have brought 10 million people to it, and they would have bounced off. I mean, and so at the core of your application, you need something that's kind of fundamentally delivers value and can grow itself organically.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all the TechCrunch posts in the world aren't going to do anything for you.
Thank you.
Kevin, what was it about Tech TV or ZDTV and Tech TV that spun off so many interesting people? Because like Jim Lauterbach is working on Revision 3. Chris Perillo's doing a media thing, and
I don't know. I mean,
Leo Laporte started his own business. It just seemed like it spun off all sorts of interesting ideas as well.
I mean, you had a lot of people that came to work at Tech TV that were really into media, and they were great personalities on air, and so they could then take that personality and carry it into their other video blogs or their podcasts or whatever it may be, and it worked.
Got another question here.
I'd like to know how all this applies to the mobile world. Do you think it's the same or it's completely different?
To the what world?
So monetization on the
Monetization.
mobile side.
Mobile.
We don't have any mobile
you mean
entrepreneurs
Google
here.
itself, or people using search?
No, mobile.
Just monetization of
Yes.
applications.
Google.
on
Oh, no,
mobile.
exactly.
Mobile.
Mobile is kind of tough because the carriers control everything. It's a walled garden, and they control what applications get on there.
But that's
and-
changing with the
They'll
iPhone.
change in a few days.
That's what I
Yeah,
heard.
it might actually. We got to get online and see what Steve Jobs just announced.
Oh, did that just happen?
Yeah.
All right after we get off stage, we'll check on that.
Could I just mention one thing about the previous question? I think people tend to overlook search a little too much, and there's a fascination with social networks, but still, search engine optimization and search engine marketing are tremendous ways to kind of get very targeted, specific traffic. And even if you're paying for search just for testing purposes, it gives you a way to kind of test reactions to a product. And so you can actually start a company by creating landing pages around what the concept of the business might be by keyword vocabulary based on what you think will convert, see and test the reaction to the landing pages, and then figure out whether that's a reasonable product to start looking at for further investment in actually building a product and trying to engineer for SEO traffic. And I think that while there's tremendous opportunities in looking at social networks as being a way to spread information virally, people aren't investing. I mean, SEO and SEM have been around for 5, 6, 7 years now, and I still think most companies don't really have a good strategy for even understanding what their keyword vocabulary is and semantic equivalence to that, how much volume and inventory is coming in on those keywords, engineering their site to achieve SEO, and then doing landing page optimization based on the traffic that's coming in, either based on paid or organic search. And that's tremendously valuable work to be done when you're building a startup from scratch, is understanding the initial customer reaction to those landing pages and how you play around with very, very basic stuff, position of buttons on a page, copy at the headline, graphics, color schemes. Like a lot of times people overbuild and engineer the feature set when they're not really just testing the first basic reaction to the look and feel of the site. And that you can gain a lot of insight by doing that testing early, even before you built the product, to understand what the customer reaction will be and what the volume and conversion activities are.
Look at these guys. They've all got their phones out there.
They just announced Exchange support for the iPhone.
Oh, they did.
Fine.
They announced it.
Yeah, it's
All right,
all
we got
over
another question
TechMeme.
here.
Go
Thank
to
goodness.
techmeme.com or go to dig.
That's what I've been waiting for.
You'll find it all over the place.
Although I'm not a lawyer, I do play one on late night TV. I'm curious about your views on copyright, fair use, and trademark in the social world.
That's a whole panel discussion right there.
I do it would be a good question.
We got 1 minute.
It's all negotiable until you're making $1 million a month or more.
Yep.
Yeah, I have some history there. I was vice president of Napster back in the day. So you're right, that is a whole nother discussion. I learned a lot, and it's a complicated topic, but not one that we can cover in a minute.
No.
But it's very important, I can assure you. Last question, I'll do it. We'll hold this panel again a year from now. What do you think will happen? What kinds of changes will we see? Here's one, YouTube. Even mighty Google hasn't been able to monetize YouTube in any significant way. Do you think that's going to change in the next year? Do you think they're going to find
In fact, I just interviewed a company called Asterpix, which now is using an algorithm to look at the video you shoot and put a frame around it, and then put links off of that frame automatically. And obviously there's huge implications for the advertising model that you could build into video with that kind of thing, or with Vidler. Vidler has on the timeline, the video timeline, the ability to put comments. You could put advertising in there. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen in video, especially with the streaming stuff.
Kevin, what do you see in Dig in a year from now?
I think that we'll have a lot more of a custom experience for users as far as the recommendations that I was speaking of, and some things I can't talk about. So, yeah.
Kimball, you're going to change the world. So
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're watching very closely this year because we've had a pretty darn good economy the past 2 years or 3 years from the perspective of the social networks, and they're kind of the bellwethers in the space. And this is not looking like it's going to be a good year. Has anyone ever seen a mortgage ad on a social network before? And not going to be a lot of mortgage ads going on this year, you know. And so I think this is going to be both. There's going to be improvements in terms of how they're going to figure it out, but I think it's the most sensitive area of across all industries where advertisers are advertising, and it's going to be a scary place to be.
Yep.
And I don't talk in terms of Dig. I really talk in terms of the Yahoo Mails of today, the Facebooks and the MySpaces, where, you know, they're really just selling affinity. We know this person likes a car, so you should put a car branding ad on here. And that's about as much as they can do, and that's the worst kind of advertising to hang your head on.
Yeah, I already saw a major software company pull back all of its new projects. Anything new, it's killed. So they're already, the people who are running companies like Microsoft are already starting to ratchet back, you know, their budgets in preparation for this year.
I can assure you Microsoft's not ratcheting back. But
well, you know, you're going after Yahoo. You're going to spend all your money buying Yahoo.
All right, well, this has been a lot.
Doc, can I make one prediction?
Sure.
I think one thing that I think we will see, maybe not exclusively in a year, is you'll see the logged-in experience happening across the web. I think the thing that Facebook has recently introduced of being able to use your Facebook login anywhere across the web will happen for MySpace, for Google, for Yahoo, if it's still an independent company, for Microsoft, and for AOL, if it's still an independent company. And I think what happens then is, whether or not you believe OpenID is going to happen, you'll be able to take an account that you have with Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, AOL, eBay, Amazon, Facebook, MySpace, anywhere across the web, and you'll use that as your experience. And what I think is interesting about that is if you're any type of commerce retailer site or you have a business model already, it'll accelerate their business, because at point of transaction or other parts of the site, you'll be able to pop up a friends list and take the same experience that you have on a social network right now and have it off platform on other sites. And that continuously logged in experience around the web might take 2 or 3 years to get there for all the rest of these folks. That'll accelerate viral adoption on traditional sites that are monetizing in possibly not as fast a way as it happens on Facebook, but still in a very impactful and powerful way. And I think that'll really provide a lot of value for people on the web. Question is whether the social networks can get their fair share of that value back for providing that service.
Well, this has been great. I've had a great time here. I hope you have too. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to our panel. We'll be here the rest of the day today, so feel free to go up and say hello and ask them some questions later on. Thank you very much.